We appreciate Rogers putting us on. However, you're probably wondering, like, yeah, that's fine and dandy, but like, we haven't seen any Newfoundland acts on. What's on the go? Well, wish granted for wasted wishing, because why would you waste a wish on, like, hey, some Newfoundlander with the podcast and you want them to have a Newfoundland act on? Come on, wish bigger, people. But that being said, this week, week 4, it's crazy to think we're 4 weeks in and we haven't had a Newfoundland act on, but here we are. We had John Reardon on. I feel like that's a little bit Newfoundland because he's an East Coaster and he's filming Hudson and Rex here. We've had Bianca Andreescu, Canadian tennis player. We've had Valerie Malte, Canadian Olympian. And now, to tickle your fancies, am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to? Nobody's there. All right. I'm just going to say that we are. We have Justin Fancy on. Now, Justin's going to talk about his career, how he started in music during the pandemic, the success that he's had so far, all that good-natured stuff. You know, I don't want to bore you too much with the details because it's a conversation, so I kind of want you to listen and see what you get out of it. But there is one thing I want to mention. Listen. Again, eye to eye here. I'm from the Ghouls, Newfoundland, and I'm talking to someone from Conception Bay, south. Yes. Okay, good. If I can do that, there should be no reason why people from the Ghouls to Mount Pearl to Ghouls, Southern Shore to Mount Pearl, to Conception Bay to Ghouls, Conception Bay to Labrador, wherever you're from, can all get along and have a conversation. Listen, I listen to Open Line all the time, and there's people complaining about, oh, this is off of what this she said, and then he said this, and I'm like, we're all Newfoundlanders. Shouldn't we all stick together and go against the mainland and out west? Let's stick together here, people. All right, enjoy the episode while I laugh at my own silly jokes. Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It's kind of like a laid-back kind of podcast. Pun intended. Wink at that audience. The audience doesn't exist.
For sure. Boy.
I want to ask you to really start off, though. In 2020, you won, I think I have it here, the Music NL Country Artist of the Year and the Rising Star of the Year. Now, that's the first time in the history of that awards that you win, like an artist has won both. That's just because I wasn't in the running, Justin. I'm sorry to tell you. Like, I dropped out last minute. I was just like, man, like, my talent is just so far above. No. But tell me, what does that do for your career, not only in Newfoundland, but like throughout Canada? Because I know it's still a Music NL Awards, but like, it's still something that when you go to a show in Toronto, or if you're going to an Ottawa or Vancouver, it's still accolades that someone looks at and says, all right, but he can't be that bad.
I completely agree with that, and I think, you know, anytime you get recognition for, especially, you know, first piece of work that I put out to the world, that was, you know, it was my first album, and just to see that from the industry and obviously the people that are listening to the music, I mean, it just means a lot. It motivates you, it inspires you, and then, you know, fast forward to this year, and I won the Entertainer of the Year, so that's, you know, at the ECMA, so that boosted me again. I mean, again, any time you can get any accolades for you know, your own craft and what you do, and you know, I've gotten a lot of feedback on my songwriting, and there's been a lot of people reach out and say, hey, I can relate to that. And I mean, it's a songwriter's dream. You write a song so that other people can relate and enjoy the music and you know, kind of feel the music, right? So that's what you try and do as a songwriter.
I want to ask you, because I believe I've got this written here, is you're the first ever Canadian country artist to, I guess, be invited to the Record Academy?
Yeah, so there was a certain feature, actually. It was called Press Play at Home, and and this specific feature, you know, I was the first Canadian country artist to be offered a showcase, or, you know, a feature to be on that show. So we had, this all came right out of the blue. I was just getting ready to release Beauty Queen was the name of the song, and they had contacted me and wanted me to perform. So it was a live performance. So we got together and recorded the video and audio and everything and mixed it up, and Send it along. That was extra special for me. Obviously, I found it hard to believe. Obviously, when I was offered that, and just to know that someone down in Los Angeles knows about little Justin Fancy who's singing country songs, just to have that I guess I guess recognition that I'm being heard, not only here, not only in Newfoundland, across Canada, across the states, and all over the world, which is it's a crazy feeling, to be honest with you. And I look at like the Spotify stats and Apple Music, and I'm seeing countries that I would never ever imagine that my music would be played there, and listened to. And it's just it's a incredible feeling. Just going back to this Grammy thing, I think we got some really good feedback on the video as well, and we did it all locally here. Center City Media was the name of the production company. They've done all my music videos, and we just nailed it. And I think there's a lot to be proud of. Again, coming from a small town in Newfoundland, getting an opportunity to be on the front page of Grammy.com is just extra special.
So in discussing that, because again, I'm a Newfoundlander myself doing a podcast, and like
Hmm.
I kind of relate to you in the sense of when I go on like my Spotify and see who's listening, it's like could be Indonesia, could be like Asia,
Yeah, it's
like
cool, eh?
Korea, and I'm just still like that's great, but I'm never going. And then they're just still
Yeah, for sure.
like yeah, like they're just like what? And
Yeah,
then they'll tune out. I'm like no, that's fair. Like it is what it is.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I do find it interesting because like in my own bubble, when I first started this off, I was thinking like, okay, I want to have a Newfoundland audience, then a Canadian audience, then a US audience, but it doesn't really work that way. It's like whoever can
right,
hear it will hear it.
right.
But like, do you find yourself sometimes trying to be not necessarily like that Newfoundland, uh, I guess, bubble or that perspective, but like still being proud to be a Newfoundlander, but still appealing to a mass audience? Because I find it sometimes
Yeah.
I'll drop a yes by on a podcast, and then someone will comment in a section of, "You said yes by," and I stop listening, and I'm just still like scratching my head, like,
Yeah, well,
"But you seen that there was more minutes left in the episode," and then you got to kind
yeah.
of explain to them like, "Oh, it's slang, it's a term," but how do you kind of walk that fine line?
So the biggest thing for me, and the biggest advice that I got, was to be myself, and to never try and act like you're somebody else. Be yourself. Talk the way that you've always learned how to talk, and say yes by and what are you at today, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like that was the I going back to, I think about going back to last June when Makes Me Wanna got chosen as the Rogers One to Watch. I was the Rogers One to Watch artist. And my song overnight literally started playing on about 20, 25 radio stations, Rogers, right across the country. So it went from like, I think it was spinning at like 82, and it went to 44 the first week on the Billboard chart. So it was a big moment for me. And obviously, I had a few interviews with Rogers and stuff. And I remember Wendy Boomer, we call her, and she's one of the music directors. With Rogers, and I remember her saying, "Just relax, like your shoulders are up like this, and you're kind of like scared to death, and you're trying to talk like a mainlander, and you're not a mainlander. Like just relax, be yourself, be yourself." So we had to record a couple of tidbits for radio, like "Hi, I'm Justin Fancy. This is my new single, Makes Me Wanna. Hope you like it, and whatever." And I was like, "Hi, I'm Justin Fancy. This is my new single," and I was just, I
Yeah,
wasn't myself at all. And if there's anything I've learned, throughout this, is that people like to see your natural self. They don't, they can pick it out. I mean, you're your own worst enemy. You're always going to listen back to yourself and think, oh, well, this can change, that can change, whatever.
yeah,
Um, when it comes to that. But I mean, the most important part of it for me, and what, the feedback that I've gotten is that, let your personality shine. I think that's the biggest. So yeah, I am a proud Newfoundlander, but in the same breath, I'm trying to create a national image and not a Newfoundland image. And I think that, we're surrounded by water. We're always going to be surrounded by water and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, I'll try and be careful here. But like, my first music video wasn't going to be me sat on a rock down by the ocean with my guitar. I mean, it just wasn't,
what
it just,
the
yeah,
outrage? No, I'm not kidding.
exactly. So, becoming a becoming a Canadian country artist, I mean, I'm picturing trucks and dirt roads and back roads and like in laid back kind of night. I mean, it's just you have to attract the broader audience. I mean, I've written songs in the last couple of months that has Colorado. It has there's talks of drinking, and there's talks of trucks and all this kind of stuff. It might have never happened to me before, but it's just something that I write that adheres to the way that country music is going right now, and that's more of a national audience. I mean, I can sing about fish
Yeah.
and out on the water all my life and codfish and kissing the fish and all this kind of stuff, but I mean that'll only get you so far inside of the Newfoundland bubble. I'm very, very, very proud to be from Newfoundland. And I've been inviting every artist and every industry person I've met to come down here and experience it, because I love living here, and I'm proud to be a Newfoundlander. It's just you have to kind of nationalize yourself.
You had a lot of success kind of during, I call it like the COVID bubble, but like
Hmm.
that obviously, yes, it helps you in your career because listen, we're all in lockdown. We're probably all listening to music going, how do we go from here? Like, where do we go?
Right.
But
Mm.
during COVID, what kind of things did you do to keep yourself distracted besides music?
Yeah, I mean, it had a lot to do with music. I can tell you that, and I think it freed up time for me to actually say I'm going to do this thing, and I think I worked from home, mostly over the pandemic. I'm working from home now, but I didn't have a work from home job when the pandemic started, and I had a day job as an IT person, and I'm still an IT guy with a different company, but. Going back to that, I mean, I was able, like, my guitar, as you can see, is right behind me there, and I'd have a 5 or 10 minute break or whatever from a meeting, and I'd pick up my guitar, and it was something that I wasn't accustomed to. So I think music was a big part of me over the pandemic, and I think I always tend to go to music when I'm, I guess, feeling a certain way, or if I'm bored, I'll pick up my guitar. It's just something that has grown with me over the years, and I think we had so much time on our hands with the pandemic, and I just really put a plan together that seemed to work. And I mean, it wasn't, I wasn't reaching for the sky in the beginning. I was going to release a song, see how it went, and then I heard the first song, the production of that song, and then it just took off. Then we just started the train, and I ended up taking advantage of, I guess, talking to a lot of radio remotely as well. Normally, you do what's called a radio tour, and you go to the radio stations, you travel, and you go to the radio stations, physically. You show up at the radio station, do your interview, and you meet these guys, right? And radio wasn't doing a lot of Zoom meetings or phone calls or anything of that sort. They didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, if you wanted to
Yeah.
meet them, you had to show up there, right? So a lot of that changed. To my benefit, obviously, because I was able to meet all of these people, through Zoom calls and emails and all that kind of stuff. And the only real thing, and a big component of being an artist was the touring, and that was completely gone. So my first album, I couldn't tour that. I'm hoping to tour this album now coming up in the spring, and I think that's the only real part that has been missing, the only component that of my career thus far that I haven't been able to really do. I mean, I've played local shows, and I did my CD release actually at Glendinning Golf Club, and that was pretty much in the middle of the pandemic. It was just starting to slow down. The cases were down, and they were just starting to this was on the first wave. When the cases started to go down, they kind of opened things up a little bit more, and then I did my CD release, and that went extremely well. Yeah, so I've been just chugging along, man. And I mean, there's an engine that you need to start when you do this, when you release music and everything else. A lot of independent artists don't really start that engine. They just release a song and expect that it just hits the world, and and it's the biggest hit ever. But I mean, you have to market your music. You have to have a team. You have to have, if you want to target radio, you got to have a radio promoter. If you want to, if you want to do things like we're doing right now on a podcast, or if you want to get on global news or CTV or, any of that kind of stuff, you need someone shopping that around. So there was always something that kept me busy. And it's still, I mean, music is a big, big, big part of what I do in the run of a day. I mean, it never ends. I mean, I think I've got 5 or 6 interviews now. I got a music video coming out on Friday, and it's just It's steady, man, and I love it. I really really enjoy it. And not so much the part of having to repeat myself on how I started playing guitar every single
Yeah,
time when I was
yeah.
13, and whatever. But just the fact that I guess the media and stuff is interested in what I'm doing because they see the accolades and everything else. I mean, it means it a lot, and I never ever take it for granted. It's something. You look at Robin Ottolini, a Canadian artist, Canadian country artist. She released a song F-150, and it absolutely blew up on TikTok. And this is she's touring right across the U.S. right now, and
Yeah.
touring with some of the biggest country artists in the U.S., which is amazing. And she's an amazing performer, and it's just everybody has their I guess their moment or their time that they really need to take advantage of it. And she had the right team, the right people around her to make that happen for her. And I'm really happy for that. I think the biggest thing for me when I first started this, I wanted to learn. And if I have any advice for any emerging artists or independent artists that are wanting to break through and believe that their music is what it is, and they want to get played on radio and all this kind of stuff. I did a ton of research, and I had some time. Don't get me wrong, over the pandemic and everything, I learned a lot. But I asked the right questions. I asked to meet with these radio people, and for them to get to know my personality and what my I guess investment in country music was. Was I a one hit wonder or one song kind of guy and then gone trying to get on the radio? And but I've kept it consistent, and my campaigns have been consistent. And I think radio in the world really respect that, which is going back to the advice for anybody that wants to do what I'm doing right now, or what the biggest artists in the countries are doing. I mean, you start a machine, you keep consistent. Songs obviously have to be competitive with everything else. There will be a lot of no's, and you have to be able to take that constructively. I think that's a big thing for artists, because artists have egos. Artists believe
No,
that
they don't. What are you talking about?
everything.
No artist had egos. They're the nicest people. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but if you always believe, if you invest time into something, that it's good and it's great and whatever. And then obviously we talked about this before about your family and your friends and your direct fans are telling, oh my god, it's a number one hit, it's a number one hit. And then you go to radio, and radio says, no, we don't like it, bye.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a harsh reality. I mean, and it's all of that is one radio guy might say yes, we love it, and then the next guy says no. And it's just, it's a very 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 tough business to be in. I have to say. So if there's any advice, do your research, and you feel like you got the music, shop it out there, and get the industry people to give you feedback on your music. I think that's huge. And developing a presence and a consistency is a major key in attempting to have a career in music.
to finally close this episode off, I want to play a fun game. We call it random questions. This is kind of where I lose the podcast to some extent. It's a random question generator. So I kind of dictate a little bit of control over what the question asks. But again, if it's something that you're like, hey, I'm not going there, totally fine.
Cool.
So the first question, do you remember the best chirp that you ever received?
Best chirp. Oh man, that's a good one. Yeah, I do. I started playing with the Navigators. Oh, this is a good one. I can't believe I just remember this. But yeah, I mean, this one stuck with me when I first started playing downtown. I played in between the sets of the Navigators, so it was Arthur and Fred, and they had this song, "Dance and Sing." It was called. So the first beginning of the song starts. I can't remember now how it goes. She's known as Nancy. She's young and wild and free. She's known as Nancy. So then the guy started saying, it's Justin Fancy. He plays his songs in G. It's Justin Fancy. He plays all his songs in G. Right? And they kept, that was the biggest chirp for me. Bit weird, but yeah, I did start off playing literally all my songs in G. So
Yeah, that's when you're like, oh, he's pointing out a fact, but I don't want him to point it out anymore.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that was kind of a chirp, for sure.
What is your best memory to date in terms, it can be just in music or in life?
My daughter's birth, 110%. I think it's something, it's pretty much automatic to me. My daughter means, a lot to me. And I wouldn't be doing this music thing without her support. And, she's 9 years old now and she's probably watching. So love you, Kay.
It'd be funny if like you said if she didn't support me, I wouldn't do it, and then she's just like, actually, I don't support it, and you'd be like, nah, that's okay, I'm still gonna do it. And be like, what? I'd be like, yeah, I just really wanted your support, just so it made me feel a little bit better. I want to ask you, like, do you remember the first time you ever went on stage, and were like, what was your nerves like? Because I know for me, when I went to do comedy the first time on stage, I was pretty confident, and then when I
Yeah.
left, I was like, okay, I don't know what I expected, but I thought I was going to be like at a Kevin Hart show where they're going to be like, oh, this guy's hilarious. I love them. And then there was like 5 people that were like, he's okay. And I'm like, okay, they didn't boo. It was
Yeah.
okay. So I guess I stay out of here alive. But do you remember the first time you went on stage and where you're like, oh my God? Or was it like, finally, I'm
The
doing
first
this?
the first stage for me that, and believe it or not, was 2008 in Canadian Idol. It's the first
Oh,
stage that I
yeah,
had
okay.
ever been on, and it was quite. I guess it was a realization moment for me. I didn't have any nerves going in, and as soon as I stepped on the stage, it just all hit me. And even the audition, like when I auditioned for Canadian Idol, it wasn't bad at all. I mean, yes, had a little bit of nerves, but until I flew to Toronto and I kind of got on stage with cameras around and all this kind of stuff, that was, I mean, I can't explain it. Another moment like that was this year. I played Boots and Hearts. I was one of the 8 emerging artists across the country to showcase at Boots and Hearts, and this was in just outside of Barrie, Ontario, at Burrells Creek, and it was like easy 20,000 people there. And again, I was side stage and I was ready to go. My band was there. I wasn't, I was feeling anxious and I wasn't nervous. I was just anxious. I wanted to get it over with. And as soon as I stepped up on that stage, all the nerves just hit me again. It took me right back to that Canadian Idol moment. But put me in a bar or pub or anything like that, or at my own show or whatever. I mean, I don't feel any nerves nowadays. It's just those bigger settings, right? Obviously, because there's a lot on the line. You know.
Do you ever think that you'll get to like a point? Because I know some artists do, and that's totally their call if they do. But do you ever think you get to the point where like you're at a concert and if it starts getting too rowdy or too crazy, you're like, you know what? I'm Justin Fancy, and I'm not performing here tonight because you guys are too rowdy. And they'd be like, what happened to this guy? Or would you kind of be like, hey man, that's me. I can do this now.
Well, I can tell you there's been a couple of times like that in a pub setting. You go in there sober as a judge and everybody's drunk and shit happens and I walked out on a couple. I'm not proud of this, but I've walked out of a couple of bar settings where I was just like, guys, I can't do this. I got a mic in the
Yeah.
mouth one and chipped my tooth one night, and I was just bleeding. And I finished the song and I just put my guitar. I never told anybody anything. I just put my guitar in my case and my mic in my case, and I walked out and walked back. Walked out and drove home. It was
Yeah.
just one of those moments where I was just fed up. But I mean, everybody's there for a good time. I mean, it was an accident, whatever else, and I kind of look back on those. Probably hurt me a little bit when it comes to the bar and the pub scene. But yeah, I mean, there's been many nights. That you kind of and you gotta bite your lip most times. It's like social media, same thing. I mean, if you start barking on social media, there's gonna be people, there's gonna be haters out there that are always gonna turn in a different direction, and they'll probably get off on you.
Oh yeah.
Your anger or whatever else, right? It's just I've just learned to be very quiet when it comes to that stuff.
Well, I think
you
it's
know,
interesting kind of to close it out because, when you mentioned earlier about like Robin Ottolini and her success, like we've had
Mm.
Robin on, and I remember asking her kind of like the social media aspect because you don't see a lot of it's promotion stuff, but
Yeah,
there's not a lot of just say her
yeah,
interacting.
for
And
sure.
and then I asked her like, how do you find that? Because there's going to be people out there going to be like, well, she doesn't engage with her fans. I'm like, well, she probably does, the ones that are like actually fans, but there are people out there that are like, oh, you think you're better than this now, blah blah blah. I'm like,
Yeah,
what purpose is it to respond to that? And then that person screenshots it and goes, hey, I got to him, or I got to her,
absolutely.
or
Listen,
whatever.
the biggest thing is to not react to that kind of stuff and not give anything to anybody to take advantage of you when it comes to that stuff. You might think it's the worst and most ridiculous thing in the world in a comment that somebody's made, but I mean, you gave them that opportunity to roast you or do whatever you're doing on social media. So for me, again, it's going back to just watching what you post. I mean, my page, if you look at my Facebook page, there's nothing real political on there or whatever else. It was at one point. And I think, most people know what color I am when it comes to political, whatever. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, you have to be neutral with that kind of stuff. And you just don't put anything on social media. And this is for every artist. I mean, it reminds me of an independent artist that I was following on Facebook, and he absolutely roasted radio for not playing a song. And I'm like, you just ruined your career. Like, you just ruined your career for over one song because radio didn't like it. Your next one could have been a major hit, whatever. But, I mean, he took that time to roast the radio, and I mean, it was the talk of the industry for days after that. And this was a guy who was an emerging artist. So, I mean, you just have to pick your battles. I would say stay out of all battles on social media and just keep posting your brand and just keep being true to your brand.
See, I really like that you respected that artist's name because that was me. That's why I didn't win the 2020 Newfoundland Artist of the Year, blah, 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 because I was on radio and I was like, oh, you're going to pick Justin Fancy over me. And then they were just like, easy decision. You made it easy. And I was like, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But
For sure.
I'll show some people are going to be like, was it him? I don't understand if he's joking.
No, it wasn't you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Justin Fancy for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.